Before Marvel Studios started, there certainly were superhero movies, but there wasn't a genre per se. There was movies certainly about superheroes, but I wouldn't say it had genre or genre conventions. It was a lot of stories meshed up into one. There was no real cinematic rules to it, and it was seemingly undefined. Then the first Iron Man came out, and I remember when I saw it because I personally didn't care about Iron Man before going in. He, when I was a kid, was a comic I didn't really read unless it was part of a crossover, and his cartoon was something I slept through to get to a show I was much more into, the Fantastic Four part of the Marvel Action Hour. But as I was watching Iron Man, I was instantly connected to it. There was a Robert Altman-esque kind of character piece to the whole thing. And that's essentially what that film was about. It was about Iron Man entirely. They have the first almost 2/3 of the film is about his arc, going from being a selfish playboy who drinks too much and parties too much, to the cave, to coming out of it, to finally fully becoming Iron Man when he goes back and fights for the village of his friend. And that was a huge change for the genre. Before that, you'd have to acknowledge all these other characters, set up the villain. Think of the first Spider-Man movie. It's almost as much about Green Goblin as it is about Peter Parker. And this was a film that was saying, let's just make this about Iron Man. Let's nail this character. And boy, did they. I mean, everybody pretty much loved that film. It was an unexpected hit. Like, Robert Downey Jr. wasn't a box office star at the time in any sense of the word. He was much more of a supporting actor. And then he suddenly becomes the biggest star in the world because of our connection to him, because of the way we saw him and got to breathe with him and understand that character of Tony Stark. And I think that's incredibly important to an audience, and it showed Marvel what to do with a superhero film. What is most important is landing this character.
I am Iron Man.
So we will want to go with them through countless movies and Avengers films and appearances and so forth. And you saw that in Captain America. You saw that in Thor to a much lesser extent. You saw that in countless other movies where suddenly when you nail that landing, when you nail that first film, you as an audience have to come back. And it's much like in an independent film, like a Robert Altman film in The Long Goodbye, where it's all about character. It's not about all these other things. And that's what became the superhero genre, is our connection to them.
I love this all day.
If you think about superheroes, you think about the iconography, you think about the money and the success or whatever, but you think about the idea that people get Superman logos tattooed on their arms, they wear Spider-Man shirts all day, they have this connection, they talk about them, they obsess over them. But the reason they do is because they love that character. And I think the thing that Marvel Studios did better cinematically than what was going on before is it understood the paramount concern of making these films. If you look at any of their trailers, you notice that they're selling the character much more than the plot of the film, because that's what's most important to them, and that's what they really have to nail. In a lot of ways, that's what keeps you coming back, because I feel like I know Tony Stark, you feel like you know Tony Stark, and Robert Downey Jr.'s portrayal of him, and that's what became of the superhero genre in general. If we look at the successes of the genre since the Marvel Cinematic Universe started, we look at things like Deadpool, Shazam, Aquaman, or Wonder Woman, all films that care more about the character than the actual plot of the movie. I mean, they're kind of like afterthoughts and things we've seen a million times before. Even Logan is similar to that as well, where it's mainly about the character of Wolverine. And yes, it's the most successful Wolverine movie there's ever been. And I'm not talking about financially, I'm talking about artistically, because you're with him. And when you have an amazing, well-trained actor like Robert Downey Jr. or like Hugh Jackman or like Ryan Reynolds or Chris Evans or whomever, then you're able to let them breathe and kind of do kind of a character piece. There's going to be a certain magic there. It's much like the classic Hollywood studio system, where you had a great, well-trained actor do kind of a character piece, and suddenly you're connected to them. Look at Gary Cooper in High Noon, or countless of John Wayne's cowboy films, The Searchers, or Rio Bravo probably is a better example. You're watching them hang out, you're understanding them as characters before they have the big shootout at the end. And that connection gets you through all of these things, and it makes you relate to them and care. Like a good friend, like a friend that you know at work or in life. You can't wait to see how they react to a certain piece of news or tell them the latest gossip. The MCU does that as well. because you know how Thor is going to react to Tony Stark, or Doctor Strange is going to react to Peter Quill. Those personalities are so defined, you can almost taste it. And it makes those major events kind of mean more, because those events aren't just because of the explosions. I think that is a huge miscalculation to people. It's how these characters work through those events. If you think about New York and the Battle of the First Avengers, it's almost more that they came together and the implications it put into Tony Stark and changed all of the characters involved in that. Or Sokovia and the implications of that. And even in Infinity War with the snap. It's not so much that they fought these like weird dog things, because that's not what's important. That's why people don't care about the villains as much. The ones they do are villains that you have a connection to and kind of understand. Your Loki, your Killmonger, or Thanos himself, is because you get who they are as a person, much like you do with the protagonist. These big conclusions and the big action sequences having to be with their person, their personalities, aren't just because we see it through them. We see them almost as a big redemption arc, specifically in Guardians of the Galaxy. You look at that, and that end part, sure, it has the typical, big explosion kind of blockbuster thing, but it matters more that Peter Quill and the Guardians of the Galaxy have decided that they're going to be heroes, that they're going to turn their lives around, and that he's going to build up and be able to open that package from his mom that he's put off his entire life. He feels like he's finally good enough to be able to do that. And with understanding the true implications of what that package means to him, makes that conclusion all that more richer for you as an audience. And that's also why you can have characters just kind of glance at each other, or say a quip in a major fight, and we understand it as an audience. Because that's what this really is. It's about these characters. That's what the MCU is trying to sell to you. It's trying to sell to you these superheroes, but it's trying to understand to you in a way that great characters always do.
I can do this all day.
When I think of the moments in cinema, when you think of like Luke Skywalker looking out and thinking about his future, thinking about, does he want to stay on that farm? Even though he's scared and even though he's unsure, he knows he needs to do it. Or even Dorothy in The Wizard of Oz singing out and going, is there somewhere over the rainbow? When I think of those moments, I think of such a connection. And when I think of the great movies, specifically Hollywood-made films, but not just, I think of the connection we have on a cinematic level, and the good and the bad and the success you can have with that. And if anything, the MCU sort of weaponized that to such a great effect. In some ways, these are power fantasies, and that's why people want them. They want to be big and strong and powerful and be able to do anything they want. But in another way, they're not true power fantasies, because their lives are still complicated. They still have real life to live. The world's never going to be completely solved, and they acknowledge that. But when I think of my favorite moments from the MCU, it's never just seeing Marvel continuity on the big screen or seeing so much come together. It's that feeling that you know that you understand them, that you see yourself there, and you want to see it continue. It's the ultimate cinematic serial and blockbuster experience, because it's about the same thing that all great stories are about, and all great stories that appeal to a massive audience. And that's always been character. Character, like a good friend, is what keeps you coming back. And as long as we have that, we'll have that thrill, and we'll have that necessity to go out and see it on opening weekend, and see it again and talk about it, to see what the MCU has become, to see how far superhero movies have gone, into not just being about blockbuster, but really being the major studio force about character. Much like Westerns were before, much like many of the big blockbusters are, if they're done successfully. They're never really about the thing that everyone who hates them notes that they are. These films were always about character, and that's why we care so much. And in a lot of ways, much like how you can almost feel that feeling of Dorothy singing somewhere over the rainbow, that connection, if done right, never really goes away.
I could do this all day.
And I think maybe the Marvel Studios, frankly, aren't as good as The Wizard of Oz, but I think that connection is there. It shows you what great storytelling and cinema can really do. And that's really how the superhero genre and Marvel Studios became what they are, because they were able to do that. I'm Jim Gisriel, and this was Deep Focus.